Hello! Welcome to another episode of Wicked Easy Cooking. My name is Chef Colin Roche, and today we're going to be making biscuits and gravy. Now, being originally from New England, I wasn't really brought up with biscuits and gravy. Actually, I wasn't even familiar with them at all. I didn't know what they were until I came down south. Now, having lived here in Florida for a number of years, down here, biscuits and gravy rule. I love them. So I'm going to show you today a wicked easy recipe that you can make in 30 minutes or less. Get it on the table for your family. So let's get started. Okay, so I have the recipe here, which I am going to post at the end of the video. I'll include it. I'll also post it down in the comments section so you can make this yourself. Now first we're going to make the biscuits. And when we're going to throw those in the oven, they take about 15 minutes to cook. While that's happening, we're going to make the gravy. And then they should all come together after 30 minutes. So I'm going to show you a quick way to make the biscuits. Okay, so for the biscuits, we're going to use a food processor. It cuts in the butter really quick. And as you know, maybe watching my previous video on homemade buttermilk biscuits, there's a couple things you want to do. One, you got to keep everything cold. So I actually have my butter here frozen, which I'm going to grate. We also have our buttermilk cold. We have all of our equipment cold. So that's going to facilitate the rising of those biscuits. So let's add everything in. Okay, we want to mix our dry ingredients first. And as it says in the recipe here, we've got about 2 1/8 cups of flour, all-purpose bread flour, whatever you'd like there. We're going to put in a teaspoon of kosher salt. You know, it gives a little bit more coarseness. Throw that in there. Then we have 1/4 teaspoon of our baking soda. So I put that in here. And then we're going to have our baking powder, which is 2 teaspoons. This is what's really going to give it that leavening. So kind of level those off, put it in there, spread it around. All right, and now what we want to do is pulse a few times to get those combined. So let's do that right now. Okay, we've done that. Now we can add in our ingredients. So I have the butter. As it says in the recipe, it's a 1/2 cup. So again, I'm going to have it cold here, and I'm just going to grate it in. 1/2 cup is 1 stick, and we'll just grate this in. Then we're going to add our buttermilk. Also should tell you that your oven should be set at 425, and you should have a pan ready to go that I'm going to use parchment paper on. So let me finish this, and then I'm going to show you the buttermilk. There. Now, if you don't want to grate it, you could just cube up the butter with a knife and throw it in, and the food processor will chop it up pretty good. But I find that sometimes it leaves too big a chunk, so by grating it only takes another 30 seconds, and it comes out like, you know, mozzarella cheese, grated cheese in here. So I think it gets better distribution. So now that we have that in there, we can add in our buttermilk, which according to the recipe is 3/4 cup. So I have my buttermilk here. We'll pour that in. And we're going to add that into our food processor. And then turn it on. Pulse it till it's just combined. This knives of the food processor is cutting that butter in, spreading it out, because that butter is the key thing in our biscuits. What happens is water in it. When it hits that hot oven, that water turns to steam, has lift, gives our biscuits that flaky layers in between, which gives it the texture we're looking for. Okay, it's all mixed up here now. Let's clean up and let's roll this out. Okay, so we just want to kind of put it into a ball first, you know, just to get everything to stick together here, all of our dough. And then we kind of flatten it down into a, I guess, rectangle here, best we can. Then I've got my little rolling pin here, and I'm just gonna roll it out. And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna fold it onto itself, kind of like, you know, you would with a puff pastry, laminated dough. And what'll happen is that'll make layers. So we've got this, you know, pretty good size here, rectangle wise. And now I'm just gonna take this end and I'll fold it over onto itself and push that down a little bit. And then I'm going to do it just the opposite, do it this way. And we'll do this a couple of times, you know, fold it over on itself, maybe 3, 4 times max. That's going to give us those nice layers we're looking for. Okay, this is our last time. There we go. Now, we're going to roll it out to about a 1/2 inch thick, which if you don't have a ruler, and me, I always measure, it's about my thumbnail. So roll it out to about that thickness. I think that's about right. And then, as I mentioned, I have a sheet pan here, a little baking tray. I'm going to put some parchment paper on it, which you can pick up in any grocery store, pretty much. And then I'm going to use like a 3-inch cutter here. This one happens to be fluted. You could use straight. I'm going to put a little flour around that so it doesn't stick. And when you're pushing down on the biscuits, don't twist them. We don't want to pinch in those sides. We want to leave them kind of, you know, not squished so they'll rise up when they hit into the oven. So when you put it on, just, you know, push down on it. So push down here, put one on this side, and then just keep doing this until you complete it. And then any of the scraps left over, we'll roll that out too and get a few more biscuits out of it. Now we'll probably get about 10 biscuits. So there's, you know, the first one, pretty nice. We want to put the biscuits into our pan and have them touch, you know, keep them close. That helps each other when they rise up. Put those next to each other. All right. As I mentioned, we'll roll this part back out again. Yeah, we got 2 more there, and I bet I can get 2 more out of this one. That's 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, we'll get 10 biscuits. Put that one on this side. 1 more here. Okay. Now, before they go in the oven, here's a little trick. You could put some melted butter on them, which will help them brown, or use the buttermilk. You have a little buttermilk left over, just get a brush for that, and you can just brush that on the top, and that'll help them brown when they're in that oven. Help facilitate that browning process, which is what we're looking for our biscuits. So we're just going to give them a quick little paint, and in the oven they go, as mentioned, 425, about 15 minutes. Check them at that point. In they go. Okay, we got our biscuits in the oven. They're going to take 15 to 17 minutes, depending on your oven, how brown they get. So you have to keep an eye on those around that point. And now we're going to make our sausage gravy, which is basically sausages. You want to use some kind of breakfast sausage here. Any type you want. There's maple flavored, brown sugar flavored, honey. There's so many different varieties out. Just make sure they're a breakfast sausage out there. One tip though is I would get patties or bulk. You know, the bulk comes in those little tubes, or you can get it this way. The links are okay in an emergency, but they have those casings on the outside of them, which you're going to have to cut off. So it's just an extra step. So just buy it in patties or bulk. And then all it is then is a cream sauce, or actually a bechamel as we call it in the culinary world, which is thickened milk. So we have our 1/3 cup of flour, which we're going to use with the grease It comes off the oil from our sausages to make what they call a roux, our thickening agent, which then we're going to slowly stir in our milk, let that cook, and then we just have to season it. Classically, it's just salt and fresh cracked black pepper, lots of it. I'm probably going to add a little onion powder too, but you know, it's up to you. If you want to add some other herbs and stuff, you can. Just be careful. Usually there's enough seasoning in the sausage, depending on which brand you pick, that it takes care of all the seasonings in our sauce. So I have a pan over here that's on medium heat. We're going to toss this in there. We're going to let it brown up, and then we're going to start our sauce. So let's go. Okay, as you'll see in the recipe, it says brown the sausage up in a pan in medium heat, medium-high heat. So we want to brown that up, render all that fat out of that sausage. So we just throw that in. I got a little wooden spoon here. Just let that cook for a minute. Then we're going to kind of smash it up and crumble it. Okay, it's going good. Okay, we're browning it up here. You don't want it too brown. If it starts to stick on the bottom of your pan, you know, maybe the heat got a little away from you, got a little too hot, just add a little bit of cold water. What will happen is that'll allow you to scrape up everything off the bottom, and it will cool down your pan so it doesn't overcook. You know, you don't want to be scorching it. You just want to kind of, you know, break it up here with the spoon and then grind, get a little tan, you know, brown it up with the heat here. Okay, this looks pretty good. It's all broke up. It's got some brown in there. You know, it's cooked. I don't see too much, you know, red anymore. And it is going to cook for another 15 minutes in the milk, in the sauce. So anything that is undercooked will finish there. So that looks pretty good. I like mine a little chunky when it goes on the biscuits rather than all, you know, pureed up too much. So now we can add in our flour. All right. So we're going to dust that in. Again, this is called sanger. Not that you need to know that. And I'm going to switch to a whisk. And now I'm just going to kind of incorporate it, get it to stick to all that grease, that oil that came out. You know, grab a hold of that sausage, coat it here. It's starting to stick to the bottom. You can see on the pan here, the flour, the wet's okay. And this is what's going to thicken our milk. So once we have it all incorporated, we can slowly add in our milk. Okay, so we've got the fat all absorbed by that flour. We can slowly add in our milk, stirring all the time, scraping up the bottom of the pan if there's any, you know, solids down there. And if you slowly do this while stirring all the time, you won't get lumps. Okay, it's all getting thick, it's all incorporating. And once we get it all in, we're just going to let it cook off, get rid of that flour taste. You see how thick that's getting with that flour? So that's 1 cup in. And just give that a little stir here. Again, we got our medium-high heat. You can see it. And now we can go in with the next 2. Okay, it's all incorporated here. So now we just want to go around the edges here, especially in these little corners here, because that's where you'll find flour clumped up, you know, and use the edge of your whisk to kind of scrape in there. Make sure we don't get any clumps, you know, in our lumpy gravy. And then just stir in the middle again where, you know, you may have missed some. Okay, now it's all incorporated. We're going to add our seasoning, and I'm going to turn the heat up at the same time, because I want to let it come up to a boil so it activates that flour and starts the thickening process. But in the meantime, let's add pepper. At least a teaspoon of black pepper. Again, this is one of the keys in the recipe. So if you have it already ground, just measure out a teaspoon. But if you're doing fresh ground, you know, just put in what you think is a teaspoonful. Remember, we can always add more later when we get our finished gravy. And then for salt, it's a half a teaspoon. So, because the sausage can be salty, so we can always add more. So let's just add a little bit to start. As mentioned, I'm going to add a little bit of onion powder. think that'll really complement it. Okay, incorporate that, turn the heat up, let it come to a boil. We want to cook this for, 5, 6 minutes or so. You'll see it come to a boil and it'll start to thicken. And then we want to just let it simmer and cook out that raw flour taste and let those flavors blend and all incorporate. Okay, now I'm going to go check on our biscuits. Okay, here's our biscuits, cooking 425. I think they got like a minute left. Let's take a peek in there. Ooh, getting nice and brown on the top from that buttermilk. And look at how much they puffed up. Beautiful. All right, so we'll let them go another minute and I'm gonna pull them out. Let's go back to our sauce. Okay, as you can see, the sauce has come to a boil. Now be careful, you don't want it to scorch on the bottom, so make sure you're, kind of constantly stirring. You can turn it down to a simmer. It's gotten nice and thick now. So we're almost ready, but we want to definitely give it a taste to see if we need to add any more salt or pepper into this. So let's do that right now. Okay, I have a spoon right here. Get a little bit of that sausage in there too. Oh, that is good. That is really good. I think it's fine. Maybe a little pepper. Just a touch more. But salt is plenty. That onion helped a little bit. So I think I'm going to put these seasonings away, and then I think we can plate this up. Okay, our gravy is done. Our biscuits are done. Let's plate it up and try it. So here's our biscuits. Don't they look great? And I have a plate right here. So let's take one here. I'm going to get a big one and just crunch it open. Oh, look at how, see, I don't know if you can see those. See all those flakes in there, those layers? That's what all that rolling does and that kneading with the butter in between it. You can see the steam still coming off this. So let's put that in here. I'm just going to do one for now, just for tasting. So we can take a spoon here. I'll put it on top. I'm not even going to enclose it. Oh, look at that. Because one really gives you two. You got the two halves there. All right. This looks great. It's just simple, perfect, yummy goodness. It's hot though. Let's taste it. You don't even need a knife. You just use your fork because the biscuit absorbs a bunch of that gravy, kind of like a sponge, and gets kind of, soggy goodness. Now that's worth waking up for. That's a good breakfast. You got to try this. And please, if you do, put right back in the comments section. Tell me how it worked out. Tell me if you added any other spices, any other ingredients. If you have a different technique that you use, let me know. Share it with our community. Okay? Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.